welcome again. I'd like to begin by thanking the partners who have supported the beautiful making of today's event. Our title partner, Somani Ceramics, design and innovation partner, Groha, lighting partner, Thisva, silver partners, Berger and Godrej Locking Solutions and Systems, knowledge partner, Jones Lang LaSalle, and our associate partners, Racham RPG, ISRA, Stylum, and Renolit. And now for the first panel discussion of the day, Realizing Vision 2020, Relevance to the Indian Framework.
A warm welcome to all of you for this panel discussion on Vision 2020 as per the Indian framework. As a country, we are in the midst of a rapid change, as has been identified. An economy that is probably doing better than most of the countries, and especially a young population, and a problem of demographic shift because of the migration from rural to urban. It is projected that by 2025, our population probably will surpass China. And by 2050, the population is going to be around 160 crores. So considering all this, how do we meet these growing demands? So if I start with you, Mr. Irani. So with regard to housing for all, so what's your take on this ambitious plan of the government? So what would be our role and how much can we realize?
I think I'm very happy that there's a vision, right? It all starts with that. Just to put the numbers in perspective, between now and 2022, we've got about 2,700 and some days. And the number of homes that have got to be provided for housing for all, according to the Prime Minister, are about 2 crore homes in the urban areas and about 4 crore homes in the rural areas. But according to another research, it says that with the growing demand and need, we will have close to around 9 crore homes in all. When such a massive building exercise has got to take place, we've got to understand that the entire back-end system has got to be a lot more robust and a lot more ready to deliver. It is possible. It can be done. There are developers that are developing. What I need for this is definitely a long-term policy. The government needs to facilitate. They need to create the policy by speaking to the industry. Second, I need them to aid this. There have got to be all the pinpricks taken out of the way. The government's got to stand behind what they do. And most importantly, the government is not supposed to ever go back on any scheme that has been brought out because we are building in concrete. If you do not go back on the policy and you're not as a government bothered, and we've seen this, at least, where I come from, that every single time the government's attention is brought to by media that a certain scheme is developing a certain section of the people, the government decides to pull back. If that doesn't happen, at least, 90% or 100% or 110% of your desired results.
Coming to you, Manit, just want to understand as an architect, and what do you think we should be better suited? Is it in horizontal development or is it a vertical development in urban areas? And the role of governing bodies, in this approval process?
Now, the first is to understand that when you're talking 2020 or 2030 or 2050 or whatever, is to understand what is India's potential. And therefore, what is India's carrying capacity as a land. Now, India is about 3 million square kilometers, 1.2 billion people today. So, if we were to do a simple analysis, 1.2 billion, 5 people to a family, 250 million families, if you give each person a 200 square meter plot of land, multiply that by 3 for social infrastructure, roads, etc., whatever, you require about 3% of the land mass of India. So, there is a tremendous amount of space available. If we were to take the entire population of the world and house it in India, we would need about 18% of India's land. Typically speaking, a building weighs 1,500 kgs a square meter. A car requires about 40 square meters on average. That is 60,000 kgs of material that comes onto every site to provide a holding space, shelter for one car. So if we were to just find a mechanism of transferring the fact that we should not be providing that kind of multi-layered, multi-tiered parking going down into several layers of the earth infrastructure, and transfer that to public modes of transport, shared models of ownership of cars, look at a completely different and new economy. We can look at an economy where form doesn't necessarily follow finance.
Ratan, on this, we have been talking about infrastructure, failure of infrastructure, choke roads, transportation, such things and all. Ratan, so based on whatever lessons, we have learned, So what can we do to improve our infrastructure planning?
Probably have the issues of redevelopment that's happening, which is breaking down old parts of the city and developing it again. Then there's the greenfield stories, which is plots of land which need to be developed upon. And then there's probably the planned cities, which are greenfield city areas. The challenges for infrastructure on all these four typologies is pretty much completely different. In addition to the classic infrastructure that we know about in terms of transportation, sewerage, soil, water, drainage, water supply, power, I think there's the new infrastructure that one needs to also look at in terms of the ICT, the internet, the communication technologies. There's a lot of infrastructures becoming wire-free intensely. These are not being planned for, had not been planned for in the good old days. I think we need to look at integrating these very effectively.
So that brings to my next question to you, Zubin, on the smart city. I see it as an opportunity for all of us to probably go help in the nation building and all. So what is that we can look into as per you on smart city?
As architects, I think if we can manage to ensure that design is really not taken for granted, is something that we can add value to a project. It could make a lot of difference to everybody. I'm saying like Tata did a brilliant job with the Nano, with the car. It didn't work, unfortunately, but I think in terms of design, it was still a sweet piece of engineering. Imagine somebody, it's an open design competition. There's some amazing designers over here. Anyone around the world takes up the auto rickshaw or takes up the Mumbai train. I mean, everybody would love to be part of something as iconic as that. And that could just change the way the city is perceived. At our bit, we are all trying our best, and we all realize that there's a great opportunity for all of us to take this to the next paradigm altogether.
What's your take on how do we prepare the city for future yet maintain the architectural heritage?
I think history becomes relevant if it can participate in the present, if it can participate in a vision of the future. And fundamentally, why is there this kind of breakdown? And I think this is really, to me, what needs to be to be examined. Because when we look at history or when we look at heritage and historical buildings, there are essentially two ways in which we have, traditionally, dealt with it. One is we erase, we completely get rid of it, as in the case of the mills of Bombay. The other is essentially preservation. But let's say preservation often also becomes just a form of basically fossilization, right? They become artifacts that in a certain sense are only representative of a certain history. I mean, there are enough examples of incredible developments around the world where they've taken that old industrial infrastructure and intensified development on those sites. With those buildings present, developers could have still managed to build, the same amount of real estate, but use the old buildings to create basically cultural spaces, use those old buildings to even create commercial spaces. So unless we don't go back to a way in which we can kind of reclaim those old values, I think history will remain as simply an artifact.
I'll come to you, Mr. Abhishek. So since it is to do with materials, I just want to touch upon probably we are talking about affordable housing, and we are talking about housing, enormous housing being built and all. So what can we do on Make in India on the materials? And, any innovation on the materials, using of local materials, responsive to the local climatic conditions?
From a tile part of it, this is probably the only industry which we've been able to re-engineer the product and reduce the price by about 20% over the years. And inflation adjusted over the last 5 years about 50%. So from a cost perspective, we've done a lot within the industry in terms of re-engineering technology and also economies of scales, which have brought down the price by that significantly. But I would like to look at affordable housing beyond just product. We are doing our bit. We have experts like Roha here and other sanitary ware manufacturers such as ourselves and tiles. We're doing a lot on re-engineering to bring the cost down. But a lot of it to do it with skilled development, required training, plumbing training, mason training. We can reduce the cost. For example, our mason training can reduce the cost of cement by about 30 to 50%, wastage by about another 50%. So that also is cost. But this is as far as the cost part of it is concerned. But the other part of affordable housing and housing for all, which is largely going to be affordable, is you can make a product cheap, but can we run the product cheaply? Because you're going to be, the people who are going to inhabit it, these are going to be inhabited by people who are middle class and lower middle class. So I don't think very many developers are re-engineering the architecture to harness natural resources. Who's talking about re-engineering where we can harness light, harness water harvesting? So I think the idea is, one is build cheap, but also run cheap. Can we re-engineer to harness more of the natural resources so that we're actually more efficient and smarter?
So when we talk about the best practices in smart buildings, what we talk about, water efficient, energy efficient, self-sustaining and all, Shirish, probably you're the right person to ask this question.
So we must be very clear about what vision is. I remember what Helen Keller once said about vision. She was blind, and she said that it is terrible for a person to be able to see and have no vision. When we talk of a vision needs to address our present day maladies and sicknesses of the society. In terms of design, there's one more thing I think we should think of as designers is whether we can create spaces which are multi-purpose. Even in cities, I think one of the areas or the resources that we have are the terraces. So many open blank terraces are there, unused. Is it possible to have some kind of a connectivity at the upper level and can link these terraces and make them into viable public spaces? Can we shift our emphasis from sellability to measurable sellability to immeasurable sanctity? This shifting of attitude is very important, from glossy wrappings to inner content.
The only thing which comes out, we always need to look optimistically, and even though the goals look quite challenging, be it housing for all, building tier 2 cities, smart buildings and all, based on the discussions what we had, it is possible. For transformation for me means change for the better. And we believe, the construction industry, real estate industry, are the true change agents. With that, probably I would conclude this session. Thank you all.
So we've been associated with this summit, this platform for about 3 years, and we started it with Economic Times. The idea was mulled jointly, and the primary goal was to see how we can bring all industry practitioners together, which is the builders on one end, architects on the other, and the government, to see how we can make better cities, smarter cities, more sustainable cities.
Coming for events like this really helps you open your mind because you get to interact with architecture students, you get to interact with people who have been in the business of architecture and urban planning much before at least my years of even getting into development. People who have a vast wealth of experience and are ready to share it openly.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a panel discussion on Small is Big, Transformational Designs for Modern Compact Spaces. Please put your hands together for the esteemed panel. And Mr. James, over to you.
You have a lot of innumerable pieces moving in design, that maximizing the land usage, the government approval, the choice of the material, everything. The topic what is given today, Small is Big. Transformational designs for modern compact space, is literally leading us to where we are headed to on land usage, the shrinking resources, especially around land, which makes designers and creators of these spaces job very, very challenging. They need to be innovative. They need to look at that space in a very different angle to bring the best for their client as well as for themselves. I would like to request Mujib to share his views, and from there we can hear every panelist's views around this.
There are two aspects about the development that's there. That's the micro versus the macro. So one of the basic thing that we always do when we deal with the projects, the office, whether the attitude, the way you approach the project, whether the process approaching a macro project to a micro project, is there a difference in the perception of the way you deal with the project and the way you deliver the project. In Czechia, where you deal with real microspaces, but still they can come up with incredible architecture and incredible interpretation of contemporary living. The world over standard for the micro project, especially in the residential, is between 180 to 240 square feet. World over, organizations are realizing that the open plan workspaces are kind of generating nearly 40% work loss, and what they're coming back, what world over the organizations are doing is more like a focused workspace, which gives more space per employee, which they can focus on. People are going back to, not exactly to the cabin, but they're going back to places where they can have a lot of privacy than an open plan. So it's basically, office space are going back to that, where you need to have per employee workspace becomes more. For us, architecture is a language. Like whether you write a tome, whether you write a small book, the grammar is the same. So that's where I've come from. It's basically you use the same grammar to kind of write a small book or write a large book. I guess your attitude to architecture should also be the same. Like you look at the macro level or micro level, you look at the same focused way.
Let's move to you, Milind. If you could share your views around
2050, 75% of people will be in urban areas. And to add to that, if we just look at a whole global context, in last 2 decades, the world population has increased by 30%. China population went up by 17%. The US population went up by 22%. And India's population in last 2 decades went up by a whopping 40%. So it is just giving us a magnitude of what kind of housing provision we need to make in the forthcoming decades or years, whatever. So we have a situation where there is a choice whether we stay paycheck to paycheck, or we kind of move into a smaller property and enjoy life and better things in life. Second aspect to it is why people have migrated into a smaller houses, like what we also seeing in our profession. Today we are seeing a situation where there are people who are in 60 plus, 50 plus, they are either retired or maybe they want to do early retirement. There are also potential people who are now moving into smaller houses. So obviously there are the reasons are, one is financial, but besides that there are other reasons like health reasons. People want to retire early. People also want low maintenance. We also see a psychological phenomenon in India where you see after 50s in India, people are very proud that their children are going abroad, but the malady is they go and never come back. So these are also the kind of families where the children migrate to other states and other cities, and the size of the house is no longer required.
Maybe we'll move this side to Nuzima, if you could share your views.
I would say that small is big. When you look at it, I'm personally of an opinion this phenomena is because of a lot of factors which work around us. Social, cultural, time values could be money, time, everything. It makes a lot of factors which are working. And these factors have reflected directly or indirectly, they have changed our lifestyle. A design, in whatever manner you do, there is a repercussion of social and cultural repercussions which happens with whatever we design. We want the best and the big to be delivered in the least amount of, whether we say value, time, or in terms of spaces also, we want the best. And we want the big packet in that, I would say the big value or a big, whatever big we want to imagine about it in the smallest possible package, which is possible.
We'll request Syed, sir, if you could share your views.
For me, real estate or architecture is something close to my heart. I don't know how to design, but I can value the best design. I appreciate the best design. And for me, every project should make difference to the people and the planet, small, medium, or big. And once we achieve that, I think we can sleep and we can snore at night. And that is the bottom line of design. In other perspective, 1.2 billion Indians, and that is where the architect community should contribute, should think out of box. And in sustainability also. In the sustainability aspect, everyone has to play their part, but I think the most significant part should be played by the architect, by virtue of the design. And our sustainable design should not be like an American style of material centric. But for India, the ethos of India is we should be design centric.
Kumar, if you would.
All of us who all are here, we definitely, whenever we design a product, when we talk about, we always talk about urban people, and we design a product because we know, if we build a product for urban people, it will get sold very easily. But, if the majority, if you were in a country like India, the majority is in the rural area. Rural area, the requirements are small, but small is big. If you get into the products where we can sell it to these small people, the numbers are high. So the volume per se will be much higher. So small is big, I define in that way.
Thank you very much. That's a very way. God, could share your.
I'm a lighting designer by profession. And how does light play a role in, say, a small residence where it's small is getting big? So when we look at a residential space, the olden times we had a living room, a dining room. Each function has its own room. But now we just have one studio apartment and all functions and all activities happen in the same space. The challenge for a lighting designer is how does one just put one kind of lighting for all these activities? So lighting has got to be very activity-centric, wherein you put in different layers of lighting. So you have the same space needs to be transformed into a living room, maybe into a dining room. Sometimes somebody might want to work in the same space as an office or a reading area. So you need to transform this space into different kinds of activities based on the kind of function that happens in that space. So I would say creating different layers of lighting will what will create small is big into the space.
On this topic, if you could share your views.
For me, small is big is a very diverse topic. It could mean different things for different people. The way I look at it is it's been a triangle through the ages. Like if I go back 2,000 years, the population of the world was just 250 million people. And the triangle would mean the developer, the architect, and the policymaker, which has always been the case. The population doubled. It took 1,600 years for the population to double. And by the time you reach 2015, it has gone 15 times, which is right now at 7.5 billion people. I think people have been used to seeing big stuff, but as things have gone ahead, I think the materialistic values that has, in a way, made people lose the human touch. And right now we've reached a position where suddenly, there is scarcity of space. People want certain things, whether they want, they want so much for their materialistic aspirations. And now, you have them given like a smart city or a smartphone and a smart board. Is that a solution that we are looking at? Or are we looking at something which is more sustainable, something where human touch is there, where you make something small, but at the same time you have that human touch which comes into, like when it comes to landscaping or the environment you're creating around that?
Thank you very much to all of you for taking the time.
ET and Groha got together as design and innovation partner, and I think that's very much the philosophy of Groha. So we're very happy to partner that.
I think it allows architects and designers to interact, to understand the roles they play in a similar project or similar space. And the more we do that, the more powerful the collaboration that one would expect out of this whole thing. And I think the future is collaboration. So if an architectural fraternity collaborates with the whole, the rest of the creative fraternity, which is whether it's graphics, navigation design, furniture, product, I think there'll be a far bigger, wave that would be created with the whole design expression in India.